Let us reflect and focus on this line from the book of the prophet Ezekiel, chapter 9. But do not touch any mark with a towel. That mark signifies, above all, belonging to God and the divine protection of those who remain faithful amidst sin. Some ancient translations identify the mark with the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Origen of Alexandria, one of the fathers of the early church, noted that certain Christian interpreters saw in that letter a shape resembling the cross and a foreshadowing of the sign Christians receive on their foreheads. By the way, that tau letter is the same one used by the order or Franciscans. It is worth noting that Pope Innocent III, in his opening speech to the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, recalled the vision of the prophet Ezekiel, messenger of God's forgiveness, which we hear in today's first reading. The Pope emphasized that those marked with the letter tau would not be punished because they had remained faithful to Yahweh, and he invited all Christians to accept it as a symbol of the urgent spiritual renewal the church of that era needed. The mark on the forehead mentioned by Ezekiel foreshadows belonging to Christ through that cross. The church teaches us that in baptism, the sign of the cross marks with the imprint of Christ, the one who is to belong to him and signifies the grace of redemption won by his cross. St. Thomas Aquinas links the anointing of the forehead to the sacrament of confirmation, which grants the strength needed to profess the faith without shame or fear. It is not a magical form of protection. St. Augustine warns that the mark of Christ must not be made merely on the physical forehead, but also upon the heart and for one's entire life. Thus, making the sign of the cross, without living according to Christ could be a contradiction. The authentic mark manifests itself in thoughts, words, and deeds. Ultimately, the mark on the forehead reminds us that we belong to God and must not remain indifferent to sin. Jesus teaches us today that correcting a brother does not mean condemning or humiliating him, but rather seeking his conversion and restoring his life to the community. If he listens to you, you have saved your brother. Therefore, Christian correction must be carried out with truth, prudence, and charity, following a gradual and respectful path. When we gather anytime to ask for healing, reconciliation, and Jesus' help in our needs, he explicitly reminds us today in the gospel that where two or three, probably more, are gathered in his name, that he is in the midst of them, in the midst of us.